Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the affirmative action and the race, gender quotas, all that sort of stuff that's I guess been brought into sharper focus with that American Supreme Court decision that it's depending on how you interpret the judgment, it's illegal to select people for the universities, or those particular universities at least, based on race by using affirmative action quotas. So what, just background for those who aren't across this, they were denying the university's admission, were denying access to the university for particularly Asian, as in Chinese and particularly Asian students and some white students in order to bump up the numbers of black students. So they stopped using a merit system to say, well, the people with the best results get entrance, and if you don't make the grade, you don't get in. So they trashed that and said, no, we don't want to do that because we want to have different racial outcomes based on equal proportional outcomes for the overall racial mix of the nation at large. Now, that's not the university's role. It wasn't. Their job is or their role is to take in the brightest students and then help those students by giving them a rigorous further education, tertiary education, so that they become the future business owners and business leaders, doctors and engineers, scientists, and so on. Now, if you have the brightest people, theoretically, if you have the brightest people at the top of your society making the decisions, then resources are better spent, productive outcomes are more likely, and then society at large benefits. So there's a lot to be said for putting the brightest people through the college and encouraging them to go on to do wonderful things, whether it's to discover the cure for cancer or design the next rocket to go to Mars or something like that. But if you got or surgeons, they're able to discover a new method of operating on people's whatevers so more people are cured and live better lives and so on. So these are the sort of people you want at the top. But that's not the way that the universities have been captured by the ideological, Marxist crowd, if you will, and they say, well, equal outcomes is actually more important than getting the best and the brightest through the university, and so their emphasis is on that. Now, this is a general sort of Marxist view that's applied now, certainly to the non-elites anyway, across the world, so of the Western world. So, for example, the last few videos I looked at, all the adverts, and you get 2 or 3 adverts now with everyone, all the adverts now feature non-white people in majority or no white people at all, and particularly pushing the idea of the black man with the white partner, white female partner, and if there is only white people in the advert, then they're gay, or trans or something like that. So it's now effectively not permitted to have white people exclusively in an ad. You can have exclusively black people or any other guys, but white people no. So now I don't know, did anyone vote on this? Did anyone agree on this? Did the advertising agencies or whoever funds all these things come out? You know what? We're not going to. This Australia might be a majority white country, but we're not going to allow white people in any of the adverts, and certainly not a majority. And if they are, they have to be gay or lesbian. And anyone that disagrees with that is fucking Hitler. So I wish they'd come out and be that sort of direct about it, but they don't. It's all underhand. It's all done in the propaganda classic style. So let's have a look at this subject in a wider context. I, for one, am in agreement that the best and brightest should go to certainly the elite colleges or universities. I've got no problem with that. If that means more of one lot of people get in there than other, then that essentially doesn't matter. If you do want to make a social issue out of this rather than racial equality, you could look at it on the basis of social integration equality, or social integration issues. Now, if I go to any Indian-owned, as in the subcontinent, any Indian-owned business in Australia, they'll have maybe a token white person, but it's an exclusively an Indian gig. If they have to have, as in, there's certain requirements that they just have to have white people, they will, and they'll use them as the flunkies, the prestigious, well-paid jobs exclusively for other Indians, even Indians that have been born here, or where even their grandparents have been born in Australia. They're still very, very much that they want to share the good stuff with their own diaspora. They want their sons and daughters to only marry other Indians, in fact, preferably to send to India for a bride or a husband. They don't want, they don't really like them marrying, the sons or daughters marrying Indians who've been born in Australia. They prefer to keep the Indian culture and certainly the genetic diaspora absolutely pure. And so this idea of sending back for brides and husbands is really how they do it. Again, whether they're born here or their third, fourth, fifth, even sixth generation, they still do it. So if someone, if you give the best spots in university to Indians, whether they work hard for it or not, Indians never did very well in Australia at school until affirmative action came in. Suddenly they started to do well, at the same time. So I'm really suspicious of this claim that Indians are so clever and so hardworking. I never saw it before, and then just suddenly it starts to happen. So I'd say that's an affirmative action gig. But anyway, let's put that aside for one moment. The Indians don't integrate into society. Now, some will. I mean, you'll always be able to find an example of some that do, but generally they don't. They're here to share all the wealth they can acquire within their diaspora and their family and so on. They will only employ other Indians, and again, particularly for the better jobs, even if they've been born here 3 or 4 generations ago. So they're not if you want to level a charge of racism, you level that against them, and they're now quite a large minority in Australia. So what they decide to do and don't decide to do actually has quite a big impact on. They also invest in businesses that are not viable in any competitive commercial sense. They only make them viable by bringing out illiterate peasants from rural India and paying them shit money and all these sorts of things, and using all sorts of offshore loans and tax scams and whatnot. It's only through that they can make the business viable. If it had to compete commercially and pay the proper wage rates, it wouldn't. So there's a lot of exploitation of their own people in this, of course, but nonetheless, they've got non-viable businesses that don't pay any tax. Why would you want those sort of businesses around? So why it helps us get cheap prices for burgers or chicken or take out food or something like that. But is that really what you want, given the cost of it is so high in other social terms? Now the Chinese, even the ones who've come from Hong Kong, I mean, not even just from mainland China, again, they very much only employ other Chinese. I've gone into Chinese businesses. They wanted to use our services. So this is in a business sense. So they wanted to use our services, and there's not a single white face or non-Chinese face in the whole fucking building. Now I speak Chinese, or Mandarin, so I can hear what's going on, hear the different dialects of Chinese that are being spoken, and that's someone who's from not from say Beijing, but somewhere else in rural China. The accent is quite different. So I can pick up those regional dialects and note that and all the Chinese restaurants only employ Chinese people. You don't see any non-Chinese people there. And again, that they import the peasant labour from China or wherever they can lay their hands on it to come and work in these often food businesses, not always, but primarily food business, or things like beauticians' parlours, painting nails and this sort of thing. Bring out all this peasant labour. None of these businesses are viable in the real world. But in place, say in real estate investment companies, and there's a lot of those around Australia at the moment, that are Chinese owned. again, they don't employ any fucking white people. If there is any white people employed, it's the little blonde receptionist, because they love hiring blonde girls or girls with red hair. It's like, well, so that they put those out front there. That's it. So now the same can be said for, not to the same extent, but the same can be said for Jewish people. The propensity of certainly by my experience, the propensity of the Jewish people to hire other Jews in the better paid prestigious roles, in the flunky roles, sure, that they'll employ Gentiles, but in the well-paid prestigious roles. And if you look at, say, making one of those propaganda movies that says how evil Gentiles are and how all Christian Gentiles are Hitler and all that sort of stuff, you look at the whole production crew, to the cast, the writers, you'll be lucky to find a single non-Jewish person in that group, or someone that hasn't been taken from senior high school by, if you like, Jewish radicalization groups, in the, say, like that John le Carre novel, the little drummer girl, to sort of using them in that using Gentiles in that sense. So this is and this is something, by the way, that people warn me. I years ago, I think I've mentioned this in other videos. Years ago, I was put in the human resources, personnel, as they called it back then, put in the human resources department, and for a role that was to be filled. This was, I was filling in for someone who's like going away on vacation or something like that, and they put me in there in this big company. And so I done the interviews. And I said, okay, well, this is the guy. This is the guy to hire, and his name was Goldberg or Goldstein or something like that, and I hadn't thought about his Jewishness. It didn't cross my mind. I didn't care one way or another. He was the best, based on the criteria I was given. He was the best candidate, and I was happy to offer him the job. And I was talking through this with one of the senior line managers, and he said, "Why do you want to hire this guy?" Well, he's done this. He's and I gave my reasons, and so who else have you got? He's the top of the pile, but this guy was all right, or that guy. And you didn't worry about people's names in those days. So if someone said who was it, you would talk about their capability, not whether they were white or female or Jewish or lesbian. That wasn't an issue. You concentrate what had they done, what capability could they bring, what value could they bring to the organization. That was it. So you didn't know the person's name. So, well, who's that then? So you'd have to pick up like the details in your notes and look at, okay, well, that was Billy Bob or Jimmy Jack or whoever. And then you'd look at the name. That's how relevant names were. So he said, well, no, look, I don't want to, this guy's Jewish. And as I recall, it hadn't registered with me that he was. And so I looked at his his name's, I can't remember what the name was, Goldberg, for example. And so his name's Goldberg. So, oh, okay. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. All right, well, does it matter that he's Jewish? And the guy said to me, he said, look, he said, the trouble with these guys is once you one of them get in, they'll find ways of hiring their Jewish, other Jewish mates. And before you know it, the Jews have taken over. And he said, so I've seen it before, and so it's something that now, given this guy would be in an influential position, he'll use that to bring other Jews in and so on. So we don't want that. We want someone who's going to be impartial and fully integrates. And he ended up. Okay. No, I was pretty young at the time. I don't know, I'd be 22 or 23 or something like that. And so I just sort of, he was the boss, and okay, not something that I'd considered, but hey, Now, fast forward some years when I was in a position to sort of test that theory, which I'd forgotten about in the meantime. Test the theory. So there was a Jewish lady who was a lesbian, who was an activist, who was hired to be the HR director in this company the company I worked for did a lot of business with, so we were kind of interacting with them all day, or most days anyway. And they had the classic thing at the time, sort of all the jobs were held by straight white males, And you could almost, I mean, it's almost like she waved a fucking magic wand. I don't know how she did it, but I can't imagine she didn't get support from the executive suite. But um, within it seemed like the blink of an eye. A lot of the straight white males had gone and been replaced by primarily Jewish and Jewish lesbians as well. And it's almost like she'd gone to the activist sort of most activist places that she could and just pluck people out of that and plug them straight into this. So it changed. Pink-haired lesbians just suddenly appeared, and I was shocked at the change. Not necessarily because, and other minorities, not necessarily because I cared one way or another, but I was shocked that these people were much less quality and capability than the folks that they'd replaced. Now, if the pink-haired lesbian was better than the previous incumbent, then you go, okay, well, it's an improvement. It makes business, because if people know what they're doing, it makes business easier for us. So that's a good thing, and that I want or agree with or would support. But when you've got the pink-haired lesbian being put in there, or the black this or the brown that, then it doesn't improve anything, and things go backwards, all for the sake of some symbolic bullshit social change. So affirmative action sort of doesn't really work when applied. Certain groups use affirmative action to further the interests of uniquely their own diaspora or their own lifestyle groups, such as lesbians hiring each other and so on. White people don't do that as much. Now, white Christian Gentiles still do that, but nowhere near to the same extent. I've never had a problem hiring brown and black people, or cared about it one way or another, or Chinese people, or whatever. I've had a look, can this person do the job? And there's one that comes to mind just now, a Chinese lady who I think was quite capable, but her English was terrible, and she just couldn't understand her, and she'd come to Australia somehow. She'd got in as a as a skilled migrant, and she couldn't speak a lick of English. Oh, what a fucking joke that is! And the government insisting, by the way, at the time, we'll never let people in that can't speak good English. So she was earnest, and she was trying hard, and she wanted to, and she was looking for a job, and she's finding it tough for obvious reasons. She couldn't speak English, and given how earnest and how well, I'd say keen to the point of desperation she was, I sort of I thought, well, someone who's that committed and that trying that hard and that earnest and as far as I could tell, that genuine, you sort of want to meet them halfway, or I do at least. And I didn't care she was Chinese or anything. It didn't worry me. So she could. I was thinking, will I hire her, and I can. The company would pay for, out of the training budget, would pay for English lessons and English elocution lessons, and therefore she might be able to come up to speed fairly quickly. In terms of being able to speak English well enough to do the job. So I did and ah about it and thought, okay, but no, it just wasn't going to work. Why did you come here when you can't speak English? Why not pick a country where they speak Chinese, or where China, like Malaysia, Chinese Mandarin is quite widely spoken in Malaysia, or Singapore or something. Why not go to a place like that where you've got a much better chance of fitting in? And but we want to come to, again, I speak some Mandarin, so our husband and her, we want to go to a rich white country because that's, we think that's going to be good and we'll do better there. And well, I get that, go to the rich white country. I do understand that attraction. It's not so crowded in Australia, as there's it's a much freer society and so on. So I get all that. But again, why come to a country where you don't speak a word of it? If you wanted to come here, why not take English lessons, in the years before you came here? Why not? There's a lot of things you could have done which would make your life much easier. And now you're here, you're struggling, but for obvious reasons that were obvious to anybody. It would have been obvious to anybody. You're not a moron. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't use these words with them, by the way. You're not a moron. You would have known how difficult it would be. Why? If I go to China and can't speak a word of Chinese, I think it's going to be difficult. So I learned Chinese beforehand, that sort of thing. And she's, oh, well, if you don't accept me, you're all a bunch of racists. So, no, don't give me that. Don't give me that. You have to make the effort as well. Now, coming now to equal sort of outcomes. So what we're talking is affirmative action has its limits and produces, in the main, perverse outcomes, not equal outcomes, but perverse outcomes, and we need to sort of understand that. Now, the other thing is coming back to sort of the black students, which was the Asians complaining about. So if you want to really evaluate sort of Asians, Jews, Indians, you've got to say, well, if we're going to give you these sort of gigs, because you've come to a white country, if you're going to give you these sort of gigs, you must integrate. You must integrate. This is not an option that you can take what we have and then go off and create your own little diaspora gig for your own diaspora, uniquely for your diaspora. And so, that's not it. You must integrate. And if you don't integrate, then you can't get these benefits, such as positions in Ivy League universities and so on. Now, if you did that, that would be, I think, an act of equality. Coming out of the black students and affirmative action there, does it create equality? I don't think it does. I've hired, not that I would have hired unless I was under duress, but I've hired black people. People who've had 2 degrees or a degree and a master's and this sort of thing. They've got, technically at least, that they've got better academic qualifications than I do. I don't have a master's that's supposed to be the ducks of the college or anything like that. I haven't got that. So he got these black kids who've been, they affirmative actioned into senior high school, they're affirmative action into college, they're affirmative action gifted a degree, affirmative action gifted a master's or a second degree, and so on. And then they're out in, looking for work, they're out in the world with their 2 degrees, and they land in front of me for a job interview. And I'm looking at them thinking, shit, you're barely literate. You can barely write a fucking sentence. You've got 2 degrees and yet you've got maybe second year, you've got your level of literacy in terms of written and so on, your level of literacy is maybe second year high school. And even then, not in the top class. We're talking about one of the lower classes of second year high school. And yet you're here in front of me with a senior high school diploma and 2 fucking degrees, and you're almost functionally illiterate. When we do basic arithmetic, adding things up and percentages, and it's you can't even do that. You like mathematically, you're close to fucking illiterate. How can you have 2 degrees and you've got a degree in such and such or so and so, and then when I sort of ask you to show me, can you do this, that? You can't. And then you shrug your shoulders and say, I forgot it all. But shit, you only got the degree last year. If you've got it already, I mean, holy shit. That's a bit of a memory issue there. So take some vitamin B12 tablets. But the thing is, the affirmative action has had the effect where they've been gifted everything in order to create this illusion of equality. It's not equality. They're not equal at all. If you haven't earned your degree or anything like that, then it's not equality. You're not equal to people who have earned a degree. So it's bullshit that this creates, this affirmative action and race gender quotas creates equality. It doesn't, not even close. So I'm thinking of instances where I've been under duress to hire non-white people, and pretty much in every instance it didn't work out, and I hired the best that was available, in the non-white category. So now there's really the difference of behaviour needs to be addressed. You can't create equality with different behavioural standards applying to one group and not the other. So and I'm thinking one particular black guy here, but it could apply to others. So he's got 2 degrees. I'm under duress by the board. Why haven't you hired any black people? That sort of stuff. And they're pestering me so much about it that I'm of the mindset that shit, I got to hire some black people just to get these folks off my back. And so I do. So I hired this guy. I have to pretty much create a position for him because I look at what can he do of the jobs that I need done. As in the work I need done. No, he can't really do anything. He's just not up to it. So I've got to create a job for him that really takes into account the limitations, his limitations. So I create a job, hire the black. Everyone's, oh, well done, Billy Bob. You've hired the minority, and so that shuts them up for a bit. But then he comes in. He always comes in late. When he comes in late, he's not ready. Not ready for work. He's dressed in like a shorts and t-shirt. He brings his like work clothes with him. Says he hasn't had time to shower. He's going to go to the gym down the road to have a shower because they've got shower facilities there. But it's an hour before he comes back. Oh, while I was there, I thought I'd have a workout and so on. Then he says, "Oh, I'm hungry. I got to go to the takeout food store around the corner because I didn't have time for breakfast." And he's constantly running out of money. His money management is piss poor, always getting himself into debt and living beyond his means. Then coming and belly aching to me that he's got to he needs a substantial pay rise to cover his out of control, cost of living program. His behavior was different all round. No, not just in the office, but his timekeeping, his presentation, his personal affairs, and his money management, and also his behavior in the office. He wanted to sort of hang around telling stories, and he was quite a good storyteller actually. But he was always getting into trouble. So on Friday, between Friday night and sort of Sunday, he'd always manage, not always, but a lot of the time managed to get into some fight because someone he alleged had disrespected him in some way. Now he explained some of these disrespecting episodes to me, and I couldn't work out how that he could construe disrespect. So he had this huge chip on his shoulder that he was ready to see disrespect in every court. And then he'd say to somebody, "Yeah, you want to step outside," and this, and he'd come across some guys go, "Oh, yeah, I'll do this." So he'd have these lumps on his face where he'd taken a few hits, and now so the difference was behavioural. It wasn't that he was black or anything. It was a behavioural difference. He behaved differently from the standard you need. Now, to apply those sorts of things, such as timekeeping, that sort of thing, today is, well, that's, if you're going to apply those standards, you're a fucking white supremacist, fucking Nazi, probably Hitler. Probably Hitler. If you want that guy to arrive in the office on time, dressed ready for work, you are fucking Hitler, and that's it. So the attitude is that people should be held to different standards if they come from different racial groups. Now, that's patently absurd. But if I've done a huge amount of international traveling, and I believe if I'm in wherever I am, in a non-Western country, that I have to modify my behaviour. I have to limit my behaviour to strictly business issues, because if I introduce personal or as in cultural, personal type behavioural issues, then I'm unnecessarily alienating the other people or making it harder for them and presuming that they should follow my standard rather than the other way around if I'm in their country. So I stay strictly to business, and that means sometimes they'll take me to a restaurant. I'll go, holy shit, I don't want to eat that. And it happens, but I just have to be more vigilant and I'm not really feeling hungry today, but thank you, and it's very kind of you. You just got to be a little bit more careful. That's all. But and when I go to other countries, I don't see their adverts featuring all white people. Any locally produced material, be it advertising or be it anything else, there's no white people in it at all, whether in China or Malaysia or Indonesia or fucking Japan or something like that. You're lucky to see any white people, unless it's an international production, like an American movie or something. Then obviously you'll see white people. But if any locally produced, now it's the complete reverse in the West. Now any locally produced material has this obligatory over-representation of non-white people. No other culture is destroying itself in that way. No other culture, only white culture, is destroying itself like this, and it's insane. Just on finishing off on the matter of the hiring the minority people, they refuse, certainly by my experience, refuse to be held to the standard that the other white people in the office are held to. No, we have to be held to a different standard. Well, what standard is that? So the black guy refused to, or the black people are hired, refused to be to go along with what what they were supposed to do. This guy could not arrive for work on time, could not arrive on dressed and ready for work and these sort of things. And he viewed it as an unfair imposition. So I try and reason with him, because again, I'm getting, I'm under, if I fire the guy, which I've got every reason to do at this point, then I'll only be under pressure to hire someone else, a minority. So rather than go through that aggravation again, I'd rather, look, you hired, you here, you've got the job. I'd rather make it work with him or others. I'd rather, so I'm prepared to really turn somersaults to make it work. He doesn't seem to appreciate this. Every attempt I make to accommodate him, he sees as a concession that's justified and therefore should be followed by more concessions. So he doesn't really sort of meet me in the middle on this at all. Far from it, actually. So in the end, it doesn't work out, and he's got to go. But he sees it, as I try and sort of explain to him. But you do need to arrive on time. But why? That's just what Whitey arrives on time. Why do I have to behave like Whitey? If I don't behave like Whitey and don't get the benefits out of work that Whitey does, then that's racism and oppression. But if I do get a job and Whitey does give me a job, then if he expects me to behave like other white people do in that same job, then that's also oppression and that's also racism. So they have like a buck each way on this, and which really becomes, they destroy their own position on that. The same goes for hiring brown people and a lot of women. I've hired women into senior roles, again, often under duress because they haven't been the best qualified, but they immediately presume this thing of entitlement, and so we have to be judged by different standards. The straight white male standard doesn't suit us because we can't meet that standard. Because we can't meet that standard, if you impose it, that means you're being misogynist and so on and so forth. So again, this is Western society destroying itself. But it shows there's a huge disconnect between the alleged goals of affirmative action of producing equality and equal outcomes and the actual effect of it when it's applied in the real world and in real world circumstances and conditions. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.